sometimes when I show these pictures, people say, those are just, religious pictures, but I dare people to go to Barnes & Noble, find any good book on pregnancy, and you know what? You're going to find pictures like mine inside. No matter what people believe about abortion, these are simply pictures of what goes on during the 9 months of pregnancy. Now actually, when we find out that someone is pregnant, the first picture that pops into our mind isn't a picture of a baby. We think of the mother-to-be. And sometimes I look at this picture of this mom who's waiting to have her baby, and I think of all the love she has for her child, even though this is a child that she really doesn't know yet. This is a baby that she can't even see. But when I'm in a Christian audience, I like to remind people there's at least one other person who loves this mysterious baby. And this one other person can see the baby and knows the baby very well. And that person, of course, is Almighty God. God sees, He knows, and He loves every single baby that is ever made. Do you ever think about this, about yourself? Do you know that God could see you, and He knew you, He loved you, even before the day that you were born? But if you could look inside this mother's body at about 6 months, you would see a baby that looks something like this. Now this is a developing child about 24 weeks. And actually, if the only thing I had done tonight would be come into this room, skip my introduction, put that picture up there, and then ask you what it was, I'm sure almost everybody would say, well, that's a picture of a baby. About the only clue that you have that this is a fetus or unborn baby might be the fact that the baby doesn't have too much hair on its head yet. If you look at the eyes, our eyes are closed from about 8 weeks through about 6 months or so while the eyes develop. The skin is a little bit dark and red because it's still very thin, so the color of the blood vessels show through. This is a fetus. This is an unborn child. It is legal for a doctor to end this baby's life in a late-term abortion. Now, I'd like to show you what all of the baby looks like. So the next picture that I'm going to show you is also a 24-week baby, but you're going to see all of this baby because she was born too soon. Somebody tell me, what's a baby born too soon called?
Premature.
A premature baby. Now, I'd like to prepare you a little bit for what you're going to see. I don't know if you've ever seen a little preemie before, but the baby in the next picture is going to look very small. Her skin will look a little bit dark and red because it's still very thin. Her head, like the head of all infants, will look a little bit big, and she has a plastic tube on the side of her face. She needed some medical help. But this was a normal little girl named Kelly. She was born way back in the 70s and survived. And as far as I know, she's still alive today. Now, as you can see, the little girl in that picture is very, very small. She fits right in the nurse's 2 hands. And if you really want to see how tiny she is, if you look right in the center of that photograph, you're going to see a round object around the baby's arm. And believe it or not, that round object is the nurse's wedding ring. That's how tiny this baby was. This baby is protected now legally. Nobody can hurt her for one reason. She is outside of her mother's body. But if this very same little girl was still inside of the womb, her life could legally be ended by an abortion. Now this is about halfway through the pregnancy, and I always tell people this is the terrible truth. We've all been feeding our faces from before the time that we were born. Doctors can see very easily in an ultrasound. How many of us have seen an ultrasound? Doctors have seen very easily in an ultrasound that little children inside their mother suck their thumbs. They practice feeding themselves. Now, in reality, the baby is only about, this size, as big as my hand. But this is about the time that the mother really begins to feel the baby move. But you know that actually a baby inside of its mother begins to move about the 6th or 7th week. But it's simply too small for the mother to be able to feel it. The baby actually drinks the liquid that it's in, and if you add something sweet, the baby will drink more. If you add something bitter, the baby drinks less. It's developing a sense of taste. The children go through periods of time where they sleep, and doctors even think that a baby like this one has some sort of a dream, because even though the eyes are closed, on ultrasound, doctors can pick up the movement of the eye underneath the lid. Just like when you're asleep, your eyes move around too. It's called what? Anybody? Who haven't I heard from? I want to find some other. Go ahead. Earn your money. It's called, REM sleep, right? And doctors have seen this similar kind of movement on these children's eyes. They've also discovered something that I think is very beautiful. In the last stages of pregnancy, the children can hear. And do you know that if a mother names her baby and talks to her baby before it's born, on ultrasound, they've actually seen the baby turn its head when it hears the sound of its mother's voice and its own name. And some doctors will tell you there are babies born into this world that have already learned things, like their own name. Now this is all of the baby at the same age. If you held out your hand like this and just curled your hand a little bit, that baby could rest and go to sleep right on top of your hand. It's about 5 or 6 inches, and you can see the entire body has taken shape. All of that tissue that you see over on the left has a name. That's called the baby's placenta, or afterbirth. And it's like a feeding organ that grows into the lining of the mother's womb. And that's where food and oxygen first pass between a mother and her baby. But interestingly enough, do you know that the mother's blood vessels and the baby's blood vessels never join? They go side by side, but they never connect. You and your mother were 2 separate people right from the very beginning. And it's hard for me to believe this, but we're going to lose close to 100,000 children that look like this and older through abortion this year. If you keep going backwards in time, the baby gets smaller. This baby is perhaps 4 or 5 inches, and you can tell it's probably not full term yet. The umbilical cord is really easy to see in that photograph. But you might notice something else, and that's the size of the baby's head. If you look very carefully at the head, it probably looks kind of big compared to the rest of the body. Do you ever look at a newborn in a crib? Do you ever notice that a baby's head always looks a little bit big? Do you ever notice that? And there's a reason for that. Our brains go through the most dramatic development first, but the growth of the brain and the growing together of the bones of the baby's head, that's not finished until after the baby is born. You might know that a baby has what on top of its head?
Soft spot.
Somebody's talking to me. Who said soft spot? Okay. Baby has a soft spot on top of its head, you know, for a few months after birth until those bones finally grow together. Because the fact is, we grow before we're born, we grow after we're born, and our bodies don't stop growing till we're almost 25 years old. At least this way. Mine is still growing other ways. I'm going to move backwards from 13 weeks down through a couple of stages to the 6th. This is when most of the abortions are done. But do you know what's really sad? After about 12 weeks or so, maybe a little bit younger, the baby's nervous system is well developed enough so that the baby begins to be able to feel pain. So if a doctor does an abortion after this stage of life, the baby experiences the pain. Now this is 11 weeks. The child in this photograph is probably about 3 inches, still called a fetus, which means what? Means what? Offspring, right? Because you can see all of the parts of that baby. You can see the shadow of the eye, the beginning of the ear, the fingers, the feet, the legs. That dark shadow in the center of the baby's body is the shadow of the digestive organs. Babies at this age have been known to get the hiccups. When they do an ultrasound, you'll see that whole baby kind of popping up and down inside that watery sac. But it's a little too small for the mother to be able to feel it. I don't know how many of you would like to work in a hospital someday, but I do know this. In the United States, our medical care is so good that if a doctor finds a problem in a baby before it's born, do you know they can do surgery on the baby inside the mother to try to save it? In one procedure, they actually lift the baby out of the mother, they perform the operation, they put the baby back, and a few months later, the mom delivers a healthy baby, all to save that little one inside. Which makes it sad for me to drive by certain hospitals. Sometimes on one floor of the hospital, they're doing all these fancy operations to try to save these little children. Sometimes in another part of the same hospital, they're ending the lives of those children by abortion instead. This is my favorite photograph, but it's a little bit sad. This is an actual photograph of a baby's feet after just 10 weeks of life inside the mother's body. The doctor is holding that tiny pair of feet between his finger and his thumb, and the rest of the baby's body is behind the doctor's hand. This is kind of a sad photograph because unfortunately this was a baby that was born way too soon, and so it did not survive. But the doctor who took this picture was a doctor who was against abortion. He ran this picture as an ad in a newspaper because he wanted everyone to see the truth, that abortion takes the life of a really tiny child. In fact, all of the baby might have looked something like this. This is a tiny bit earlier, right? This is a developing baby at about 9 weeks. This baby is probably about 2 inches, still called a fetus or offspring, because again, you can see all the parts of that baby. You know, the fingers, the toes. You can see the baby's ribs showing up around the baby's side. I want to show you the baby's hand. This is a human hand at 9 weeks. Can you see my finger? You can take a look at your own. The entire baby, all of the baby, is half the size of your finger. So can you imagine how small that hand and how tiny those little fingers must be? Because all of the baby is only about this big. But if I was going to be mean, I wouldn't do this, but if I was going to be mean and I took a pin and I poked that little hand with a pin, that baby would do this. Jerk its hand away in a reflex, similar to what you would do. You tap the palm of that tiny hand, the baby tries to roll its fingers forward and make a little fist. And if you could even get in close enough with the camera, at the end of 9 weeks, at the tip of each finger, you would already see the swirls and the lines of the baby's fingerprints at 9 weeks. Do you ever look at fingerprint? Do you ever really look at it? Do you know that for all practical purposes, the design that you carry at the end of your finger is one of a kind? Do you know that even twins are not identical? Did you know that? Do you know that if you fingerprint twins, on one twin, all of those lines and swirls go to the left, and on the other twin, they go to the right? Because when God made you, He meant for you to be one of a kind. And then He kind of stamped you right on the end of your finger, your own little barcode, so that you would always remember. Which makes it sad for me. Since 1973, millions of children, one-of-a-kind children, have been lost through abortion. Every one of those kids had something to give us. Did you ever start to think about this? One of those kids might have grown up and become a cure for cancer. One of those children might have been meant by God to cure AIDS. One of them might have solved the problems of our environment, the energy crisis, peace in the Middle East, anything that you could name. But, whoops, excuse me. Even if this tiny baby never did anything outstanding, this was a baby that somebody could have adopted and made a childless couple very happy. This is a wanted baby. Close to 1 million children will be lost through abortion this year. 2 million people are on a list and would love to adopt them. And they can't. There are not enough infants in this country to go around. How many people here tonight have an iPod or an iPad or an MP3 player? We got stuff like that? Okay. How many of us know who Steve Jobs is? How many of us know that Steve Jobs was adopted? And look what the world would have lost if his mother had made a different choice. This tiny baby is only about 1 inch, but doctors have seen a baby this small do a slow swimming stroke inside that watery sac. This is about the 6th week. This is about the time that the mother has accepted, yes, I'm pregnant. Almost all abortions happen, after the 6th week. But even at 6 weeks, this tiny baby is about 1/2 inch, but already you can see that dark spot, that's the back of the eye. You can see the shadow of the brain, the beginnings of the fingers and the arms, the little feet and the legs. That large reddish area is the baby's liver because the digestive system has been set up. This child already has a heartbeat. That's a sign of life. Has a brain wave that you can measure, and it's just about ready to move. And I don't know how people can talk about this as if it were not a developing baby. This picture is what made me decide that I had to do something about the abortion issue. A long time ago in Boston, when I was a young teacher, my hair wasn't so great, right? I was teaching a 10th grade biology class, maybe a 9th or 10th, but something like that. And I didn't want to be a boring teacher, right? So I hope I haven't bored you tonight. I didn't want to be a boring teacher. So I went into the biology books and, you're looking for interesting stuff. Chapter on pregnancy with all these great pictures. So I walked into my classroom, not particularly to talk about abortion, but I was going to show all of the stages of pregnancy. And so I stood at the front of my classroom, held up pictures like these, and began to describe what we are like. And as I stood there describing the baby, all of a sudden I heard a noise down at the back of my classroom. And so I looked up, I looked down to the back of my room, and I looked right into the face of a girl who was about 15 years old, and she had started to cry. I didn't know it, but this particular girl had been pregnant, and in fact, she had just had an abortion. It was around 1975. What I had just done without planning it, and I certainly didn't mean it this way, what I had just done was place right in front of this girl pictures something like her little baby whose life was gone. And she had absolutely no idea because people were saying it's just a little piece of tissue. She was young, probably scared, so she believed it, and she had the abortion. And as that girl's teacher, I was devastated. This was going to be my lesson on pregnancy, and it turned into something painful for a girl who made a terrible mistake because nobody had told her the truth. She was so upset when the bell rang, she left my classroom. I will always remember what she said to her friend when they caught up with her outside. Because she said, if I knew my baby looked like that, I never would have done it. She would have found a different way to deal with her pregnancy. But right now, tonight, if any one of us went to an abortion facility and asked for an abortion, do you know that nobody is going to show you these pictures? Why do you think the abortion places don't show these pictures? Why do you think? Why do you think? Why do you think? Any thoughts? It might change someone's mind, and what will the clinic lose? Money. Abortion is a business. And I'm a little bit of a feminist, and I can't begin to tell you how angry it makes me. How many people think women are entitled to this information, or to at least be offered this information? Women are not being told the truth about their children, and then to me there's a lot of phony talk about choice. Just a couple of quick facts. 6 weeks you had a brainwave, sign of life. Used to look at my classroom all the time. 6 or 7 weeks you began to move, right? That's a sign of life. If you put your hand right over your heart right now, the same heart that you can feel beating inside of you now, that heart was beating about 3 weeks after you got started. Your mom probably didn't know that you were there yet, and you had a sign of life. And according to science, which got me into this work, it all begins at conception, when those two sex cells join. Now the next picture that I'm going to show you is going to look dramatically different. It's not a picture of a fetus exactly, it's a picture of an embryo. And you will see the difference right away. A fetus is called a fetus because it looks like our offspring, our children, and that's what it is. The embryo is human because it has human DNA. How many of us have studied about DNA? DNA? How many of us are sick and tired of DNA? I knew that. Anyway, if you have human DNA, you know what? You're a human being, right? That's what makes us human. But the embryo has not grown enough yet so that you can recognize obvious body parts. But believe it or not, at about a month, you look like this, I look like this, everyone is supposed to look like this at about 4 weeks, kind of different. What you're looking at is the top part of the embryo. The light-colored tissue on the right is the beginning of the baby's brain, and the spinal cord, and over on the left, they're labeled for you the baby's heart. Now, for all practical purposes, they don't do abortions at the clinics at this stage, right? The mother has only recently realized that she's pregnant. She probably hasn't decided what to do yet. But also, the embryo is so small, it's only about the size of an apple seed, that if the doctors tried to do an abortion now, there's a fairly good chance they would miss the embryo and the mom would still be pregnant and have to come back. So doctors will tell, if it's a surgical abortion, they will tell women to wait until the 5th or the 6th or the 7th week. But the truth is, if anybody hurt you or me at this stage of life, we wouldn't be here today. The science of this is so clear. We are human and alive right from the very beginning. And I have to admit, that doesn't look very much like a baby, does it? No, it kind of doesn't. But I'm going to ask you a question. Maybe it's a money question. What the heck have I got in my wallet? It's a money question. Oh. I want somebody to name a creature for me. It is endangered species. When it's an adult, it's very lovely to look at. When it's young, it's kind of creepy. First hand, I saw it. It could be, but I'm thinking of something else. I'll have to give you a buck afterwards.
Swan?
Kind of. Something really radically different. Creepy versus lovely. He's going to go home. Wealthy. The wealthy, right? It's a particular kind of butterfly. And I live near Duxbury. You can see them on the dunes in September when they're migrating.
A monarch?
What is it?
A monarch?
A monarch? Yeah. I'm going to give you a buck and you a buck, and I'm going to give you 5 because the correct answer is a monarch butterfly. And your name again is?
Anna.
Anna. Give it up for Anna. And Patricia, you're right. Patricia, right? So we look different, but it's us, right? It's us, right? This is the humble beginning of everyone. This is the time of conception. The large circle that you see is the egg cell from the mother. It's about the size of a pencil dot. You can barely see it without a microscope. And the 2 darker circles, one is the nucleus of the sperm, and the other is the nucleus of the egg. 0 abortions are done now. Mom doesn't even know, probably that she's pregnant. But the same thing is true about this picture that was true about the last. If anybody hurt you at this stage of life, you wouldn't be here. Science tells us we are human and alive right from the very beginning. And what happens after this, to me, is a miracle. Everywhere I look in nature, I see miracles. How does this get to be this, right? How does it? 1 cell splits into 2. Here's my science class again. How many of you have heard of something called mitosis? 1 cell splits into 2, 2 split into 4, 4 split into 8. And as the cells divide, they are chemically programmed to become skin and blood and muscle and bone. This is a self-developing human being. Very immature, but it's a self-developing human being. Science says so. By the time we go to sleep tonight, about somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 children will have been destroyed through abortion in the United States. 40, 50 of them would look like this, and it happens every single day. And sometimes people say, well, what if the girl was young? What if she was poor? What if it would have interrupted college? And, all kinds of reasons. But I have to tell you, I believe there's only one reason why we have abortion. Only one. And it's very simple. We have all forgotten that nature's God, has given us the gift of our sexuality. And God has made a man and a woman in such a way that when they make love, there is always a chance that they could be making a life. Making love and making life are part of the same thing, aren't they? Babies are not an accident of sex. Babies are a natural, built-in part of what sex is about. Making love and making life are part of the same thing. Unfortunately, with all of our movies and our media and our culture, we've kind of forgotten this, right? People start babies, and people aren't prepared for babies, but who pays the price? You know, it's the babies that pay the price. But making love and making life are part of the same thing.